Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a mystery with facts so deeply contested, it literally broke the jury system twice. I want you to put yourself right there in the jury box with us, and let's see what you make of the evidence. So let's dive right into this massive contradiction. On one hand, you've got a husband's harrowing account of a tragic fallout in the remote wilderness. But on the exact same day, you have a seasoned investigator's immediate, gut-level suspicion of cold-blooded murder. It's the exact same event, but two totally different realities. We really have to ask ourselves, how does a single afternoon in the Colorado mountains lead to two wildly different interpretations? Interpretations that completely deadlocked our justice system, by the way. How does the truth actually get this murky? Section 1. A tragic mountain date. May 3rd, 2008. Let's set the scene. May 3rd, 2008. Up in Lake City, Colorado, Fred and Dr. Leslie Mueller are a prominent, wealthy Texas couple. She's a pioneering OBGYN. He owns a successful metals business, a 27-year marriage, 3 kids. And this particular Saturday started out, well, perfectly happy. They went to church, knocked out some chores, and then decided to head out for a scenic hike near Cottonwood Creek. They even snapped a final photo right by a rushing waterfall. But just moments later, Fred claims a bizarre accident changed absolutely everything. Now, here is where it gets incredibly specific and honestly kind of strange. Fred tells investigators that while they were taking pictures, a bluebird suddenly flew by and startled their dog. According to Fred, Leslie stood up, fell backward off a 20-foot cliff, and, in his words, took a swan dive, sliding like mush, right into the rushing water below in slow motion. Section 2. Fred's impossible story. When investigators, including former Undersheriff Bob Burton, actually got to the scene, they started looking at Fred's dramatic slow-motion story not as a tragedy, but as a scripted impossibility. Fred is claiming Leslie fell 20 feet, headfirst, onto solid rock before hitting the creek. But you know what? The coroner's autopsy showed a stunning absence of broken bones or major visible injuries. A 20-foot drop onto solid granite? Investigators expected catastrophic trauma, and it just wasn't there. Which brings us to the second massive red flag. Leslie's body was found wedged securely under a log, a full 50 yards downstream. And when you look at how shallow and rocky that creek is, investigators felt it was physically improbable. Like, how does a body float completely unbattered down a literal gauntlet of rocks only to perfectly wedge itself under a fallen tree? Section 3. The investigation and red flags. So, how exactly does Fred go from grieving widower to prime suspect number 1? Well, Bob Burton noticed Fred sounded almost rehearsed. Plus, Fred had these fresh scratches on his face. He claimed they were from bushes, but to the cops, they looked exactly like defensive wounds. And get this, Fred's broken glasses were found 15 feet away from the edge of the cliff. When police brought that up, Fred got hostile, even threatening violence. He was also spontaneously blurting out that he had no mistress and just casually bringing up a life insurance policy out of nowhere. To the investigators, the guy was practically walking around with a neon sign flashing guilty. Section 4. The prosecution's murder theory. It took a few years, but prosecutors Matt Durkin and Justin Sparks eventually built a terrifying narrative out of those physical clues. Their theory? A scuffle breaks out right near the cliff, which perfectly explains why Fred's glasses were ripped off and left in the dirt. Leslie fights back, scratches his face, breaks free, and runs down a parallel path. Then, Fred allegedly chases her into a deeper pool of water, drowns her, and physically shoves her body under that downstream log to stage the whole thing. A total cornerstone of the prosecution's case was this mannequin test. They took a dummy with Leslie's exact height and weight and dropped it in the creek. And guess what? It instantly sank. It didn't float 50 yards downstream. A water rescue expert even testified that a human would have to physically shove a body under that log. But the defense immediately jumped on this, pointing out a major flaw. The creek's seasonal water levels were drastically lower during the test than they were on the actual day Leslie died. Section 5. The defense strikes back. Defense attorneys Mike DeGuerin and later Pamela Mackey went to work fiercely deconstructing the state's entire circumstantial case. They urged the jury, you cannot guess someone into the penitentiary. They argued that severe trauma deeply warps human memory, which completely explains why Fred's story might have sounded confusing or physically wonky. But their biggest point? The prosecution had zero hard, indisputable physical evidence of a homicide. The defense brought out the heavy hitters. Medical experts systematically dismantled the prosecution's claims. A veteran ER doc testified that, yeah, you absolutely can survive a 20-foot fall without major broken bones depending on how you land. And famed coroner Dr. Werner Spitz, he testified that the total lack of defensive drowning injuries, like no marks on her neck or back from being held underwater, pointed straight to an accident, not a murder. On top of that, the alleged other woman testified under oath that Fred never pursued her. And through it all, Fred's kids steadfastly stood by him, insisting their dad was a gentleman completely incapable of murder. And then there's the motive, which was highly debatable. The prosecution threw out this somewhat weak theory that Fred was just tired of being married and wanted an easy out from a strict Catholic union. But the defense hit back hard. They pointed to a 27-year loving marriage, affectionate public behavior, and absolutely zero financial gain for Fred if she died. Section 6. 2 juries, no verdict. All this conflicting evidence led to two of the rarest, most exhausting courtroom outcomes you'll ever see. Late 2012, freezing cold, Gunnison, Colorado. The first jury deliberates for days and deadlocks. The split? A staggering 11-1 in favor of acquittal. The entire process was derailed by just one lone holdout, an engineer who was absolutely convinced the physics of Fred's story made it a total lie. Mistrial declared. But then, just months later in a retrial in Broomfield, this time with high-profile attorney Pamela Mackey on the defense, the dynamic completely flips. The jury deadlocks again, but this time it's 8-4 in favor of guilty. Two different juries, looking at the exact same evidence, getting wildly different results, but ultimately, the same non-verdict. Without a clear path to a unanimous decision, and with literally no new physical evidence to go on, prosecutors had to make the tough call to just dismiss the case entirely. No third trial. Fred Mueller walked out a free man, went back to his family in Texas, but he remains forever trapped in the shadow of suspicion, never getting the full vindication of an actual not guilty verdict. Which leaves us with one final, haunting thought to wrap up this explainer. Look at the facts we just went over. In the total absence of hard, physical proof, does the lack of evidence point to a brilliant, cold-blooded cover-up or a truly innocent man caught in the terrifying wake of a freak accident? If you were sitting in that jury box, knowing you can't just guess a man into the penitentiary based on the physics of the fall and the scratches on his face, how would you have voted?